Oh, sorry. Chewing. Black coffee and beef jerky. Breakfast of champions. Okay. Early morning hours. 40 ounce Hemlock podcast. Are we good? Check, check, check. Check's good. All right, here we go. Episode 39. It is an early Monday morning. And which means yesterday, it was Sunday. We're in the midst of this coronavirus thing. I'm sure you all have heard. Right? As we all sit here in our houses, wondering what the hell is going on. How is it we're being told not to work? Well, there's food being delivered to our house and mail being delivered to our house and people being tended to at hospitals. Sure seems that some folks are working. Right? You're not essential. Don't you know that? You're not essential. Your livelihood is not essential. Your business is not essential. Your family's not essential. Your life is not essential. Only the essential people. This is not to denigrate the people who, in a certain, very specific functional sense, are essential. I'm just saying. All right, it's Monday. Yesterday was Sunday. Obviously, we're not congregating at church, as is our wont. Which means, kid's mother. Yeah, that's right. I called her the kid's mother. Kid's mother went to the grocery store, trying to find something on YouTube to sort of not facilitate, but sort of supplement some learning on a Sunday morning. Thought I would do a little Bible story. Of course, you never know what you're going to get. I'm not a big fan of pictorializing. I don't know if this is what that commandment is all about. I really don't. Thou shalt not make a graven image. I don't think specifically. That's what that commandment's about. I think it's very clearly about sort of like, what is it, Isaiah or Ezekiel, or he's like, you build this thing with your hands. It comes from you, and then you get down on your knees and you worship it. You idiot, right? I think that's what it's about. But I do think the book is better. I think the book's better. Anyways, sometimes try to sit down and watch a decent. Find a decent program for the kids. I was thinking yesterday about doing that. Yesterday morning, woke up. It's like, let's just all curl up on the couch and watch a Bible story. So, because I'm me, because I'm dad, because I'm Nick, and there's certain topics that I tend to gravitate towards, I'm like, oh, let's look at this. Look at this, kids. Tower of Babel. One of Dad's favorite stories in the Bible. No, it's not my favorite story, like for its narrative value. God, it's like 9 verses long. It's woefully short, and sometimes you're just like, come on, God, come on, give us the goods, right? It's very short. It's like 9 verses long, and it doesn't tell you a lot. But I'm one of these people. Who I try not to. Maybe I shouldn't attribute this to my own thinking. It's probably not. It probably traces back to somebody else. I just think that there's some meat in there as I chew my beef jerky. Hang on. I think that there's some. Sorry, I gotta eat. I'm about to go run 5 miles. I think it's This is really rude of me, isn't it? Last one, I promise. It felt right as I made the comment about meat, and then as soon as I put it in my mouth, it felt wrong. All right, so I tend to think that there's something to be gleaned in that story about man's tendency to collectivize coercively. Why do I say coercively? Do I need to read the story here? I mean, look, it's not like, in this cartoon that we watched yesterday morning, they obviously had to take some creative and artistic license because, again, the story is like 9 verses long. And so what they did was they gave it sort of the flavor of like a Moses goes to Pharaoh sort of narrative. And it was kind of like, Moses goes to Pharaoh's like, hey, let my people go. Pharaoh's like, no, no, no. Moses comes back. Right? So it was kind of like that. There was kind of like this prophet. I don't recall this guy being mentioned in scripture, right? And I'm not one of these, don't put a period where God has put a comma, quasi 20th century liberal Christians. I'm not like one of those folks. I put the period. But that statement, that's about doctrine, right? That's about not adding to the word of God in the sense of like altering or expanding his law. We mishandle the law enough as is. Right? We're terrible with it. We don't need to add anything to it. All right. I mean, you often find that the same folks who are seemingly freeing you from it by liberalizing it are also adding to it in other ways. What they take away with one hand, they give with another. Anyway, because then it becomes the law not to question what they're doing. Right? Then you're intolerant. All right, that's the new sin. So I'm one of these people who tends to think there's some value in this story about, however scanty, however short, about man's tendency to collectivize for the purpose of aggrandizing himself in comparison to the Most High. All right. The story, they're spreading out across the continent. I think at this point, probably the geologists would tell us it was one continent back then. Of course, they don't agree with the whole timeline in the first place, so whatever. And by they, I mean the pagan ones. The good ones do. But I'm being a little bit punchy. I had some technical difficulties earlier, and I'm kind of forlorn. And whenever I get forlorn about doing this show from a technical standpoint, I get a little bit punchy. So there's a little inside baseball there. So man's tendency to collectivize coercively and aggrandize himself. Why do I say coercively? I say coercively because like we know from the stories of the Egyptians and the pyramids and stuff, it's not like you're just like, hey guys, want to build a pyramid? Come on over after lunch, No, it's like whips and chains and taskmasters, right? Well, they took some creative license with the story that we watched about the Tower of Babel. By we, I mean me and my kids yesterday. And of course, you have to take creative license because it's 9 verses long, and they made it sort of like there's a prophet, and then he's like, tells the king of, Shinar, who's like, you got to stop doing this. You can't do what you're trying to do. You, man, can't do this. You're forgetting, you're trying to ascend to heaven, right? And you're neglecting heaven itself, right? And you're not going to get there. And because it's an essentially selfish, sinful act, in heart, in spirit, it's a sinful act in spirit that you're committing. God's not going to let you finish it. You'll see. Trust me, he's not going to let you finish it, right? And then the king's like, yeah, whatever, dude. Get the F out of here, So he's exiled and goes, like prophets do. He goes like walking across the desert with a stick, Never welcome in his own town. Incidentally, you know why a prophet's never welcome in his own town? You ever think about this? Stop me if you've heard this one. The reason a prophet's never welcome in his own town is because God makes prophets out of normal men, and normal men are woefully sinful. And normal people are too familiar with the woeful sin of the woefully sinful man to hear what he's saying. So when you know a person real well, and you know how flawed they are, the tendency is to think of that first rather than what it is they have to say, and say, well, you might think X, Y, and Z, but I know you, and you're a F up. A prophet's not welcome in his own town. It's like, we know that dude. We know what he's about, right? That's just my thought. That's just, don't put a comma where God has put a period, or don't put it, whatever. So I am one that thinks that there's a lot of value in this story. however short and scanty it is. All right. And they took some creative license to sort of expand this story into like a 23, 25, 27-minute thing for the kids, make a cartoon out of it. And I thought it was pretty cool, you know, to the extent that I get into watching Bible stories. And like I said, I'm a little bit reticent about that. But we watched it. We sat there on the couch, snuggled, you know. I'd watch a black screen if it meant I could just snuggle on the couch with my kids. But we watched a Bible story. It was good. And, of course, Dad had to introduce it by reading the passage from the Bible and then pontificating about all the things, you know, to the extent that his, you know, 2, 4, 6, and 9-year-old could digest it. Pontificating about all the things that he thinks this passage touches on. I'm not going to pontificate about all of them here. I only have a right to subject my kids to that, not you. However, I do want to talk a little bit about it. Something happened in the course of this cartoon that I thought was pretty cool and telling and revelatory. No pun intended. Get it? Revelation. All right. So, and this is just an aside. It's not really the point of this episode, and yet in a way it is. There was this point midway through the episode where, you know, they're like, you're seeing like the tower being built and you're up in sort of like the fogginess, the haziness of the clouds. And you're like, hear the clank clank and the chink chink and all that stuff going on, the hammers and all the things, you know, tools, hammers and sickles. Sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself. The hammers and the tools, you know, pounding away, you know, people hauling stones, bricks and mortar, because they just figured out that's part of one of the features of the stories is these guys sort of just how to figure out how to make bricks in a certain way that would make sort of a brick that was more abiding than heretofore had previously been conceived of, technologized, right? A longer lasting brick, right? So now man thinks he's got something permanent he can build on. Whoops. Right. Anyway, they're showing the guys up in the clouds essentially, you know, pang pang, pound pound, bang bang. And the foremen giving orders and stuff. And then they cut down to the town. Okay? The little jump cut down to this random conversation that's taking place down in the town below. Is it called Shinar? I think it's called Shinar. And it's between two women, sort of like younger. I don't know why I'm saying it this way. I read into everything. Sort of younger, sort of like probably maybe single or newly married, younger, attractive woman, and a sort of older, kind of her senior, kind of heavier set, more robust, and a little bit more forthright with her opinions woman, as we'll discover as the conversation goes on. And the younger woman is like, you can tell in the brief exchange, she's sort of hesitant to say something negative about the project. Okay? You can tell that it's the talk of the town, you know, look up. There's this huge edifice being built, you know, and the shadow of this monstrosity keeps getting longer and longer, you know, as the day wears on, both literally and metaphorically, right? And the one woman's like, yeah, it's great. You know, she's not real obviously negative. She's not down on it. But the other woman is just like flat out. And this is where sometimes I'm watching something with my kids and I'm more just like paying attention to my kids and the thing we're watching, you know. Once I've sort of approved of it, then I'm just kind of like, I just want to sit here and cuddle with you, right? But then this dialogue happened and Dad's ears perked up, all right? And the older woman goes, I think it's ugly. She just unabashedly, she's like, it's ugly. And I was like, huh, that's interesting. I mean, it's not like interesting, like unexpected in the sense that you would have expected that the building was pretty. I don't mean like that. I just mean as an artistic choice for these writers of this program to sort of like imagine a conversation happening amongst the people who were gonna be living with this thing. you know? I thought it was pretty interesting that this woman's like, well, she said two things. I've only told you the first. She said, I think it's ugly. And she said, and you know what I don't like about it? It probably was ugly, by the way. Or it could have been literally ugly from an aesthetic standpoint, or what could have been touching her nerve, her womanly intuition, right? Was that what it represented was ugly? Maybe. I don't know. Like I said, it's not there in scripture. It's just like what the writers put in there. That was a pretty interesting comment, because it is ugly, you know. And those who have a sense of what the folks who are trying to build edifices or an edifice like this in our culture, whether that be the media edifice or the scientific knowledge edifice or the academic edifice, whatever edifice man is trying to construct, and they're all really part of one big one. Those who have been illuminated, and I don't mean in the conspiratorial sense, I mean those whose hearts have been quickened, get a sense, and this is one of those hard to get at places like the pineal gland. This is one of those hard to get at places where politics touches religion, touches society, touches culture. Those who have been reborn, some of them don't even know it. You can feel the ugliness of it. I'm trans and I'm beautiful. No offense, man. You're ugly. I don't mean you're not pretty. I mean you're defacing what is intrinsically beautiful. It's ugly what man tries to do against God. It's ugly. Okay? And this woman said it's ugly. I thought that was really interesting. Second thing she said was, and you know what I don't like? She said to the younger woman, she said, once the king's up there, it's like he'll just be, and I'm paraphrasing, I don't remember the exact dialogue, obviously. She's like, he'll just be able to be up there, looking down, seeing everything and everyone that's going on in the town. You're like, yeah, well, just to sort of think about the architecture of an ancient city like this is like, that's supreme advantage. That's like panopticon type-ish, you know? You're up there, you can look down and see what everyone's doing. It's invasive, it's intrusive, it's psychologically coercive, it's right, you're all up in everyone's business. It's the nanny state, right? She said, I don't like that. Thought that was pretty interesting. Anyway, there's a lot that's interesting about this story, right? You may say, Nick, you're reading a lot into this story. Well, yeah, maybe, you know, but it's interesting, right? They say like verse 6, what is it? What's their motive in doing it? Well, it depends. I guess it depends on how you hash it out. But one of the stated motives is put negatively. It's lest everybody be dispersed across the land. Let's all get together and build this thing together, lest everyone live their life, go their separate ways. There's a tendency on the part of the political, social left to think that unless there is top-down control of society, all will go to shit. All right? To think that unless the government owns and runs and manages and controls everything and oversees, get it? Oversees, get it? Listen to what she said. I don't like that the king's going to be up there looking down, overseeing everything that we do. Right? Unless the government owns and controls and oversees everything, well, nothing's going to work. Right? Nothing will happen. There's this tendency. That is like one of the fundamental impulses. I'm not saying it's the fundamental impulse. I think the fundamental impulse of leftism is something much deeper and darker. All right? And then we get at that a little bit in the previous series called Unmasking Antifa. But never mind that here. One of the fundamental impulses of the left is thinking that unless some person, spirit, being, organization, body, panel, committee control everyone from the top, nothing will get done. All right. And of course, all that, which is just the opposite, the antithesis of what, whatever you want to call them, Christian, a post-Christian, a quasi-Christian, a conservative, or just put it negatively, a non-socialist. This is what a non-socialist thinks, is the way things happen are people acting independently in their own interests, coming together because, well, everybody does different stuff and needs different stuff. It happens organically, right? And it happens much more efficiently than one person trying to do it all and know it all. But of course, the know-it-alls never can seem to get on with that point. So it's the know-it-alls that are always trying to build this structure. All right? In our culture, that structure is academic. It's intellectual. Always trying to tell us that unless we cede control and power and liberty and all that to them, nothing's going to work. And then every time they get it, everything breaks. Anyway, this episode's not about the Tower of Babel, really. I don't know what it's about. I certainly don't mean to read too much into that story, but I do think it's interesting that they say, let's do this all together, lest everyone sort of go their separate ways and do their own thing. And I'm like, what's wrong with that? Freedom, because again, let's get everyone together on the project, and of course, sort of we sort of know what that means, like we said earlier, chains and whips and such, right? Coercive control. All right. And when you're not on board with that, when you don't want to be a part of building that, this is why the first woman in the conversation was kind of like, she didn't really was hesitant to say what she thought, because intrinsically, and from experience, you might not know fully why. And that's why you listen to this show. But from experience that when you're not on board with that, you get ostracized, you get exiled, you get pushed back, you get animus and enmity directed your way. All right? You want to homeschool your kids. People don't like you anymore. Right? Because you don't want, right? It's like, oh, you think you're too good for the schools that our schools that our kids are in? Well, yeah, I don't agree with what's being taught there, right? I don't agree with the philosophies of teaching. I don't agree with the view of the world and everything in it that is being both implicitly and explicitly propagated. I don't believe in it. No, yeah, I think my kids are too good for that. I want them subjected to that, right? Well, now we got to outlaw it. We got to outlaw what you're doing because you will build this tower with us. See? You will. The coercive power. In our society, in our culture, it's interesting how the forms that coercive power takes. Because usually, philosophically speaking, theoretically speaking, when people talk about the coercive power of the government, of the state, etc., they're really referring to the fact that the government's got the guns in virtue of having the police and the army and stuff and the law on its side, right? It's like you pay this tax or you're going to jail, dude. It's like that, the coercive power of the state. But in essentially or nominally free society, it's interesting what other forms that coercion takes. And that in many ways, that's what this show, and I don't mean this show, episode 39, in many ways, that's what this show in general is about. I mean, if you listen to this show, you kind of know, right? I mean, it's like I say, I put all these different topics and series titles and stuff, but it's all kind of one thing, right? It's interesting what other forms that coercive power takes. A lot of times, because we live in essentially free society where people can kind of like, follow their muse, the coercive power is more subtle. All right. It's more subtle. It's more suggestive, or as the left likes to say, nudging. All right. But make no mistake, behind those nudges is a fiery animus, a hatred, an enmity for your non-participation, the scope of which you probably can't really wrap your head around. They hate you. In fact, when I think about when I think about the origin, not that I want to get into like self-historical assessment here, but when I think about like why this show started, I think about like two things. One is sort of like just the general experience of being in academia, graduate school, and so forth, and sort of seeing behind the curtain. I talked about this in the first episode, as bad as the first episode was. Don't go back. Just listen to me here. Don't go back and listen to it. What being there was like, sort of seeing what was going on behind the scenes. You really get a glimpse of how much this class of person who's all in for the building of this thing hates those who are not. All right? This was sort of the more specific experience that I think of when I think about this was standing in my brother-in-law's kitchen in about probably 2004 or 2009. Back just as maybe, I think I was an undergrad at this point, maybe just going to graduate school. Somewhere between 2004, 2006, 2007, something like that. So my brother's a real blue-collar guy, standard, archetypical, he's a painter, paints interiors of houses, drinks about 6 Budweisers when he gets home from work, none the worse for the wear, does it all again the next day. Right? Good dude. I remember having this, I was sort of just kind of delving into academic life and sort of realizing, sort of having this epiphany, sort of having the curtain pulled back for me about what is going on in this world, how much that's going on there is geared towards undermining and subverting everything that his sort of normal, everyday life was based on. And I said to my brother-in-law in that conversation, he sort of asked me how I liked school, and I was like, honestly, man, I'm sick of it. I don't like it because I'm having this realization. I said, look, the best way I can put it for you is this. They hate you. Like you. I'm not talking about me. I'm like, I hate school because they hate you. I'm like, I don't know if you realize, man, but he was having, in the midst of having 6 kids at the time. He was probably on like number 3 at this point. Don't send them there. They hate you. They will try to steal those kids from you. They will try to plant ideas in those kids' minds that undermine everything you've tried to do in raising them. I mean, they hate you. Why do they hate you? Well, they hate you because you're not involved in this project. Like it says in the Tower of Babel story, lest everyone go their separate ways. They hate you because you're not on board. You're going your separate way. You don't believe in the thing they're trying to build, and thus you're not helping them build it. All right? They hate you. And what I remember most vividly about this conversation was feeling like I couldn't really communicate that. I could say it, but I couldn't really get across just how vitriolic and just how real and just how purposeful was the mindset I was trying to describe to my brother-in-law. Because I'd sat in those seminars, those lectures, in those offices, in the department, and had those conversations and listened to those lectures and participated in those seminars and the Q&A. I'd heard the things that were said and the way they were said about the, common person in America. And what it all boiled down to is They hate you. They hate that you don't believe in climate change. They hate you for it. They hate that you don't believe in evolution. They hate you for it. They hate you. Okay? And I didn't feel like I could really get that across. And I know that was sort of a starting point for thinking about doing something like this. I'm probably still failing. Whatever. I've kind of given up in a way. I'm kind of just winging it now. If you look at this first series of this podcast, it's called From Darwin to Donald Trump. And obviously I did that series before a lot of this had finished playing out. But we didn't have to wait for the first 3 years of Trump's presidency to understand what was going on. They were talking about impeaching him before he was elected. All right. And I know that some people look at all that's transpired and now what's transpiring with the response to Trump regarding this coronavirus, which, again, it's been stellar. Even the experts surrounding him say he's been stellar. And, of course, those experts are now not experts because all scientists agree that, right? Right? You're only an expert if you agree with the party line. If you're not, then you're not. If you don't, then you're not, right? Even if before we countenance you as an expert, if you don't agree with us now, you're not an expert. So that's how it becomes true that everybody believes that blank, or all scientists agree that blank, or there is consensus that blank. All scientists believe in evolution because if you don't believe in evolution, you're not a scientist. That's how the reasoning works. Okay, so now you might be watching this from sort of like a somewhat quasi or attempted neutral standpoint. I know, like my barber, I always go into have these long talks with my barber. My barber's like the big barber in the Capitol city. He cuts the governor's hair too. He cuts my hair. He cuts the governor's hair, right? So he's got to play it pretty neutral, because he's got for business purposes. But we get going sometimes when I'm in there alone. So we were just talking. And he's like, man, Nick, why won't they let this guy breathe? Why won't they just keep coming at him with all this? It's like, it's clear why. Isn't it clear why? They hate him. But the deeper insight is that they hate him because of what he represents. What he represents. And what he represents is you. And they hate you. This is what I was trying to get across to my brother years and years and years ago, long before Trump. Trump is just like the capstone on this. Trump is just like Trump is the common man. Trump is like my brother-in-law becoming president. They're like, oh shit. Like we have been attempting to minimize and undermine and bash this type of person over the head for years. We thought we were rid of them. We had thought we had intimidated everyone with our knowledge. We thought we had built this tower high enough over the city. We thought the shadow that it cast was long enough that these folks weren't going to keep popping up and fighting us anymore. And then Trump got elected and they were like, what the fuck? They hate him because they hate you. Okay? And they hate you because you're not on board. But in a society like ours, you can't just bust out the whips and chains to bring you on board, right? Yet. So the coercion has got to be done a little bit more subtly. And I guess maybe that's what this show is about, this specific episode, because I got something I want to read to you. I'm at pains to show you how this works. I showed you a little bit of how this works in the middling episodes of that earlier series, From Darwin to Donald Trump. Okay? I think I had a little sub-series within that series, and the sub-series was called something like Hate the Player and the Game, or something like that. And what I was trying to do, at least in part, in that sub-series of that first series, was sort of explain to you some certain types of cultural actors and the roles that they're designed to play and how they carry out those roles, okay? Because, again, there aren't whips and chains yet in that sense. So to move you to convince you to stop fighting the building of this building of Babylon, right? This Tower of Babel, to convince you to pick up a hammer and sickle. All right? To convince you to get to work with them, to come on board, to convince you that our people are as your people, right? To come on over. We're all on the same team. To convince you of that, there are these certain types of cultural operators that are at work. And this, if you've been feeling for the past, I don't know how many years, that there's something wrong with the media, as so many people have so acutely, for instance, Mark Levin, pointed out, let me just point out to you the deeper point. This is why you feel that way, because the media is no longer populated by journalists. It is populated by these role players, or what we called in those middling episodes of From Darwin to Donald Trump, these poker players, these players at the political poker table who all have a style of play and a thing they're trying to accomplish. And you have to understand what they're trying to accomplish to understand why they're saying and doing what they're saying and doing. Because they're not saying and doing what they're saying and doing because of truth or journalistic integrity or anything of that variety. They're doing it to move you. They're doing it, to use their language, to nudge you. They're trying to nudge you because they're not allowed to shove or punch you yet. They're trying to nudge you. But make no mistake, they're doing that because they hate you. Okay? So what I kind of want to chronicle in this particular episode is how that works. I talked a little bit about it in that series. I just want to come back to it. And it's really just sort of happenstance, kind of random, like a pocket dial, that I'm doing this because, well, on my browser, I kind of try to de-Google from time to time. It's futile, right? You know, the thing's going to absorb us all at some point. But in my feeble attempts to de-Google from time to time, I'll delete Chrome. And so a couple weeks ago, I deleted Chrome, got back on the Firefox bandwagon. And of course, when I start up Firefox, I don't know, maybe I can turn this off with the settings or what, you know, for being a pretty IT savvy person, sometimes I'm just so lazy about thinking about how I can circumvent certain things that I find inconvenient. But whatever, this tab always pops up with this app or platform, you know, built into it called Pocket. And what Pocket is, a moment ago I called this a pocket deal or pocket dial. That's where I'm going with this. What Pocket is like this aggregation site of all these news stories that a quote, end quote, informed, you know, thoughtful, intelligent person is supposed to find informed, thoughtful, and intelligent. Well, I'm not, I guess, informed, thoughtful, or intelligent because I find these things to be just largely bullshit, okay? But I do find them insightful for reasons that I think are not intended by their authors to be insightful. And so I just want to talk to you a little bit about one or two of these. I might even turn this into a little series. We call it, make it cute, right? Call it Pocket Dial or whatever. I want to talk about one of these because the operation, you know, I think, you know, Genesis 11 verse 6 or whatever, you know, we're bringing the plan to get everybody on board on the same page, working towards the common goal of building up the human edifice. In other words, humanism. In other words, the Tower of Babel. In other words, secular culture, you know, the citadel of man, whatever. The plan to get everybody on board doing that, lest they go their own way, lest they be dispersed to, you know, across the land. You know, homeschooling, right? The plan to do that, or the way to do it, is carried out, I think, in ways that are probably more subtle than most of us often realize. All right? And it's sort of self-fulfilling because they use, just like in building the Tower of Babel or those pyramids, you see them standing on previous floors that they've already constructed in order to construct the next floor up, because there's no other way to do it. Obviously, we're hauling these bricks up to the 5th floor, and we've got the cauldrons and things and other tools and stuff on the 5th floor there for the purpose of building the 6th floor. Just like that, They use the edifice to perpetuate the edifice. They use the fake learning. All these folks are about fake news. Fuck fake news. I'm about fake learning, fake intellectualism. Okay? Fake knowledge. You can have your fake news. There's nothing against Trump. There's nothing against. It is right to point that out. But you know what's behind it? Fake intellect. All right? Because you're not going to be moved by fake news until you lend some credence to these people perpetuating it. And the only reason you lend credence to these people perpetuating it is because you don't know or you don't realize where and how they were educated, what they think about themselves and you and the world and society and culture and God and all those things. Once you understand what they think, you write them off. You drink the hemlock like Socrates did. You go, you know what? Screw that. You guys are idiots. I'll go my own way. I won't build the tower. All right? So they use the previous floors of the building to build the higher floors of the building. And I just want to show you a little bit about what that's about, because sometimes it can get a little seductive to lend these people legitimacy because they talk in intellectual verbiage and academies and they sound thoughtful, but they're not. Okay? They're not. Oftentimes, they're parrots. In fact, the specific class of people that I have in mind, what I've called, I think in other episodes, the science writers, the popularizers, these are a really interesting class of, like I called in that episode, like players at the political poker table. They're a really interesting role because while they make pretense of having scientific and theoretical and analytical understanding of what's going on in the university, they really don't. Okay? They really don't. They've only learned to repeat things, which is why they don't get out there and debate with people who know this stuff, because when pressed on a point, they'll fall apart. They only know how to repeat what are essentially intellectual platitudes. And the articles that they write are filled with them. And those are, so they're standing on prior floors trying to build the next, trying to pull you into helping them build the 6th floor while standing on the 5th. What you need to understand is that the 5th, 4th, 3rd, 2nd, and 1st are all bullshit. Okay? Sorry. But I gotta get through this, and I'm getting a little bit worked up here. I gotta go run in a second. Might have to break this up into 2 episodes. The kids are gonna be up in a while. If I'm not waking them up right now. Really recently, about a week or so ago, there was that op-ed in the New York Times where this chick was like, oh yeah, blame the Christians for the coronavirus. And you knew this was coming. And of course, it's absurd for reasons we'll go into. But I don't really want to talk about stuff that is this explicitly, obviously stupid and animated with animus against you. Because that's obvious. All right? Or should be. And there's plenty of other people pointing out, and even in fairly liberal publications, pointing out the absurdity of an argument like that. That's not what I want to do. I want to get at some material, some content that really has the same goal as something as an article like I just described, but does it a lot more subtly. Okay? And I see a lot of these coming across this platform that opens up automatically when I open up my Firefox browser called Pocket. So I'm going to start with one of these in the next episode. All right? And we'll go through it. And I'm not going to do that here because we're already at about, what are we at, like 40 minutes here? We'll go through it there. And I hope you find it insightful. And we'll probably do a few of them because, every time I open my damn browser, there's something where I'm like, man, I should do a show about that. Man, I should do a show about that. I'm a broken record, but hopefully if I keep repeating myself, it'll make sense. All right, I'm not claiming I'll make sense the first time around, but bear with me. Next episode, we'll do this, like whatever you want to call it, pocket dial thing. We'll do this thing where we look at this article that I saw the other day. We're gonna look at a few of these. We'll look at this article, and I want to sort of continue with this theme about how the goal of undermining your thought that your life should be your own and you should go your own way to the east, right? Right? This goal of bringing you on board with building this Ephesus, how it's carried out. Because to do it, there's a negative project that has to take place. The negative project that has to take place is you have to be disabused of your current beliefs before you can believe in the state. There's some things that you have to not believe in. So the way they go about getting you to not believe in those things is interesting. I talked about it a little bit in the previous series called Unmasking Antifa. It's an essentially Marxist move that involves in taking some belief of yours and explaining it in a way that explains it away. This is like Marx's great insight, okay? Explaining away your beliefs. And all these science writers, all these sort of sciencey pundits that talk about like what science tells us about culture, all these people, that is their fundamental move. This is what they were taught at journalism school, okay? Explaining away the belief of the person that they are trying to undermine, okay? In some circles, it's called psychologizing. It's fallacious. I mean, you pick up a logic textbook, it's a fallacy. They don't care, right? Sometimes it's called the genetic fallacy, whatever. That's not important here. I don't want to get into all that academic speak here. But the point is, it takes place very subtly. And it's much more clever the way it's done than this dumb chick in the New York Times did. What's her name? Catherine Stewart. You know, the coronavirus is the Christians' fault because Christians don't believe in climate change or something like that, right? It's like it's done much more subtly and less stupidly than that. It's stupid nonetheless, but it's something you got to be able to pick up on when it's happening. It's really important that you understand how it's happening when it's happening. So I just want to walk you through a little bit of it, and I guess that's what we're going to do in episode 40. So this was episode 39. It's 40 Ounce Hemlock Podcast. My name is Nick. I'll see you next time.